Yeah, we've come a long journey. When 2 years ago, I started reading work on with Professor Carol Dweck, and then speaking to Jane Gray, the head teacher at the school as well. We looked at thought, do you know, a new learning culture for the school, because we looked and thought we wanted to see how they learn. We realised that was important. Children understanding how they learn, children. Knowing that social interactions, they were also important for learning. We wanted children to understand that to have high learning standards, they had to put effort in. So it's thinking, well, how actually can we start that? So looking at the work of John Hattie with the meta-analysis, thinking, well, how could staff understand how the two of them work together? And they do work in partnership, because when you look at the meta-analysis of John Hattie, and we looked at that with staff, we thought what influences students' achievements is metacognition, prior achievement, non-ability grouping, self-motivated grades. Very important. If the children can actually be enthusiastic about their learning, then that's a good starting place. So using the research of John Hattie, we then were able to put that together with what we wanted to do with a learning culture. So staff had a very clear from the onset, well, what we're doing is actually going to enhance student achievement. So that's where we started.
That's amazing. So tell me how you take Hattie's work on visible learning and the aspirations of mindset. How does that then infiltrate what the classroom teacher's doing? What does it look like and feel like? What activities are people doing?
That's one thing. When we were looking at learning cultures, children understanding how they learn, and that is very much part of the visible learning. So it's got to be visible to the teacher, but it's also got to be visible to the learner as well. So using the John Hattie analysis, we were looking at, well, we have to look at prior achievement. So at the start of a lesson, we've got to bring that in. We're saying, well, what do we already know? So children can make that connection with what they've learned before. Because we know that's a big influence, and also, therefore, that gives a good starting block. So that's the first one. And then it's using, well, how are we going to learn? And that's when we look at the metacognition. We call it the learning powers, because we're wanting children to think about, well, what am I learning today? How am I going to learn it? And that's when we bring in our growth mindset attitudes and our learning powers. Because if our children are stuck, it's like, well, yes, I'm happy to have a go, but well, how am I actually going to get my way forward? It could be I'm going to take small steps, I'm going to take a brain break. So that links in all with the metacognition part of John Hattie. But also John Hattie, and what we're saying about a learning culture is the student-pupil relationship. They've got to give feedback, they've got to talk to each other. And that is one of our attitudes, is students and teachers working together. And again, the children understanding, well, that's not easy. They might have to be tolerant with each other, they have to listen to each other. So again, all the analysis of John Hattie works round with what we are looking at with growth mindset culture, and it's making that connection for the teachers in the classroom, but also for the pupils, so they're understanding how they're learning.
Lynn, I wish you were running Education Scotland. I actually, or in charge of Scottish education. I really do, honestly. Tell me then, so you've got the aspirations about the learning culture and where you're trying to get the pupils to use their learning powers and to have more of a growth mindset. So how did you actually start working with the pupils then in their journey of growth mindset?
What we did to start off with, and I did it on purpose, was just put some cogs up around the school. Get their interest, thinking, well, what is this? And we started it with just the growth mindset attitudes that are main cogs, and we first of all put it into looking at pupil awards at the end of the week. So what we did was we asked for the teachers to be looking at, first of all, if they're putting in effort, they were challenging themselves, they were practicing, just to get their interest, but also not giving too much to the pupils just now, but getting them to think, well, this is what I'm looking for at the end of the week, and getting the pupils to recognise it in other people. And this really sparked their curiosity of what all this is about. And we saw assembly, they were starting to want to look during the week for people that had effort, that were challenging themselves, that were practising. So once we'd caught that curiosity, what we did then was we did a more formal input to all our pupils, thinking, well, this is what growth mindset is, this is the attitudes we've been looking at. And again, that was at the same time I did that with staff, because I had the after doing the John Hattie meta-analysis, we then looked at, well, let's do a more formal input of what growth mindset is, because I think we had to do the initial work first to say this is why we're doing it, this is why it's going to work. From there, we then looked to think it's very important that children think about the brain, and we've purposely waited about 6 weeks before we introduced looking at how the brain works. And in that time, the children were going, but what is it about the brain? What is it about neurons? Because we'd mentioned these words, but we purposely just thought, no, we want to embed the attitudes first. And then we started looking at the brain, and the children looking at how the brain, the parts of the brain, they looked at the brain as a muscle, and then again looking at the growth mindset. From there, it was then only that stage that we took in the learning powers. We started to look at the metacognition strategies, and that was important as a staff to think, well, what works for our school? There's lots of different metacognitive powers and different ways people do it. However, we thought we want to look at, well, what our attitudes are and how it's going to help the children. And staff took ownership of saying, well, if we've got cogs, the children like our cogs, let's have smaller cogs that represent the learning powers and how they all work together, how the brain works. So that, in all, took 6 months to get from the initial interest of the attitudes to thinking about the brain, and then through to looking at what we called them learning powers. And yes, it's fine to say I'm happy to have another go, but what happens if it doesn't work? If it doesn't work, then I'm going to think, well, I'll take a break, or I'll take small steps, or I'll go and ask for help. Again, it's fine for us to say, oh, we need to have these teacher-pupil relationships, or speaking to another student. However, sometimes pupils can find that hard. So, well, what powers are going to help me? Well, I'll listen. I'll be tolerant. I'll be a good listener. So the learning powers work very much hand in hand, but I think the whole attitude has to come first, and then the learning powers. And then it has developed from then. Of course, we had Charlene Joyner, who came in to do the cycling with us. So again, that made sense. They were going, oh right, we can see that you've got to have goals, and this is how she worked and how she practiced. And then at assembly every week, it has to be a continual message from the senior leadership team to go hand in hand with what the pupils are learning in their classrooms, that we every single week talk about growth mindsets, talk about mistakes, talk about practicing, looking at the neural connections, asking for the learners to come up at assembly to give their examples. So it's got to be everybody giving the same messages, everybody in the school working together. And we're still on our journey. We're still 2.5 years later, still doing that same message every week.